Story 1. Am I the asshole for refusing to pay for my roommate's girlfriend's meals? About 6 weeks ago, I, 21 females, moved in with my friend John, 22M. John and I have been very good friends for almost 2 years now. After I befriended him at work 6 months ago, he met this girl, Kat, 19 female. He told me about her the day after he matched with her on a dating app and took me to her workplace to meet her. She seemed very lovely. I was so happy for him. Since then, John is always inviting her to every friend outing, so I got to know her. We have lots in common, and for John's sake, I wanted to be her friend. However, I think that in the nicest way possible, she is a bit rude. She does art, and half the time, John compliments her work. She says, "You hate it, don't you?" Or, times we hang out with other friends, we have had to go home early as she was bored, and John was our ride home. She hasn't done anything to me personally, but I just don't like her much. I'm happy John has found someone he cares for, but having to stand by and watch how she acts sometimes rubs me the wrong way. Here's where the issue comes in. Yesterday, John and I were at the supermarket to do our food shop. Normally, we would buy our food for the week and maybe a couple of simple frozen meals to save for Sunday. However, Kat has been coming over for dinners a few times a week, and she has a very limited diet. She refuses to eat anything other than fast food or simple, frozen meals. She likely has her reasons for eating specific food, and in case it's due to an ED or something similar, I don't want to make things hard for her or pry into something that isn't my business. The time where it becomes an issue for me is how John has now wanted to buy backup meals for her in case she doesn't like what we are cooking. This would make sense as before she has been eating stuff that was part of our weekly meal plan. The problem is, John wants me to financially contribute to these extra meals for her. When I spoke to John about this and said how I am not happy paying half for her meals, our weekly shop cost is just split in half as we both eat everything. He got quite agitated. He called me selfish for not wanting to help her. Just to save money, I know frozen meals aren't the most expensive thing in the world, but John is in a much better financial situation than I am. And while I can pay my share of the bills and occasionally have outings with friends, I don't want to be dishing out extra money for meals. For a girl, I have no real connection to, as these small amounts do add up. In my eyes, if Kat doesn't like what we are cooking, she could come over on a different day, or John could buy backup meals for her out of his own pocket. I feel like an asshole, but I don't think I should be paying for an extra person's food. If my boyfriend had a similar situation to Kat, I'd see it as my responsibility to provide for him and his diet, and I'd never expect John to pay. Am I the asshole for thinking this way? Do any of you have any advice? Story 2. Am I the asshole for refusing to pay for my husband's meal at the restaurant? Me, female 30, and my husband, M32, have been married for 4 months. He likes to be independent in everything, especially when it comes to money. He's bad with money, meaning he never plans for tomorrow and enjoys buying new things every day. I approached him with the idea of having a joint account, and he said, okay. But sadly, he took it as if his salary was doubled up and kept purchasing stuff that is expensive without even running it through me. It was just like grabbing money and going to spend it. Not okay, because we have commitments. I talked to him. His response is that since his money's in that account, meaning he doesn't have to tell me about where he spends it, because technically it's his money. He admitted a joint account was a bad idea and unnecessary. In his words, am I crazy to think that everyone should just be able to have their own money to spend, regardless of whether they were married or not? We decided that each of us have our own salary, but both equally pay for everything. He agreed as long as he could buy whatever he wanted with his money. Last night, he suggested we go eat at a restaurant. I assumed each of us would pay for our own meals. We arrived and he ordered more dishes than me and 2 types of desserts. When it was time for paying, I asked the waitress for separate bills, and my husband looked confused when he heard. He said, "You're not going to pay for my meal, too?" I told him, it's his decision that each of us pay for everything individually. Told him this is what separate finances means. He got upset, saying he spent all the money he had before coming to the restaurant and didn't think I'd actually decline to pay. So it's fair that I pay for dinner. After he argued and threw a fit, I just paid for my meal and was about to leave when he called me selfish and mean. He came home 2 hours later telling me his buddy came and paid for his meal no problem. He said I shouldn't have declined to pay for his meal and was being mean to him. I told him to not take his misplaced anger out on me, but he still argued with me about what I did and how unacceptable it was. After that, I took some time to calm down. We had a talk this morning, and when I suggested therapy first thing, he said, "Okay, but who's paying?" Then reminded me of what I did and how unacceptable it was. He keeps bringing it up and wants me to apologize. In case our jobs are relevant, I'm a secretary and he's a police officer. Story 3. Am I the asshole for refusing to pay for a meal at a restaurant? My girlfriend and I recently went out for dinner. It took them a while to seat us, as they were short-staffed. We ordered an appetizer to split as well as a meal. I noticed that they were really trying to rush us along, bringing out our meals at the same time as the appetizer. The server kept grabbing things off the table, asking, "All finished with this?" and beginning to walk away with it in her hand before I stopped her and told her we weren't finished. After the third time, first the bread, then my half-filled beer, and then the appetizer. I had enough. I understand you have a job to do. Please do not touch anything in front of me until it is cleared and off to the side. Stop interrupting our meal. Please go away, I said very sternly. A friend of mine came in and was seated at a table nearby. I turned around to greet him and engaged in chit-chat for about 2 minutes. When I turned around, my meal, which I had barely touched, was gone. My girlfriend hadn't even noticed it go missing. I called the waitress over, who handed me the check, and asked, "Will there be anything else?" I told her my meal had disappeared. She blankly replied, "Oh, I thought you were done." I said, "No, I am still eating. Go get my dinner and bring it back here." She replied, it got thrown out because you looked like you were done." So, yeah, I told her to go get her manager. She responded that he didn't have time to see me. I told her that he needed to make time, because I was about to make a scene in 4 seconds. She left and a minute later came back and said that he was too busy. I told her to reprint the check without my meal on it. She refused, saying I ordered it. I had to pay for it and walked away. I let my girlfriend finish her meal, took the check, put a line through the cost of my meal, pulled cash out of my wallet to cover the appetizer drinks, and my girlfriend's meal wrote, "No tip." Your server was rude, incompetent, and threw out my dinner and handed it to the cashier as one bundle as I walked out. My girlfriend thinks I went a bit overboard and that I should have at least tipped the other employees involved. My mother, a retired waitress, is furious that I took it upon myself to alter a check and leave without paying for food I ordered. She thinks it was an honest mistake and I need to be more understanding. Story 4. Am I the asshole for refusing to pay half of my friend's wife's meals anymore? I, 28, male, have 2 friends, D, 27, female, and Tommy, 29, male. We've known each other since middle school and make a point to make time to keep in touch and eat out at least once a month, but often twice. We live a 40-minute drive apart, but it's worth it to keep the friendship alive. This died down during the pandemic, but we're back at it semi-regularly. Again, I am single aromantic. They've never made me feel like a third wheel. This isn't a date I'm invading. It's decompression time for friends to have a nice meal and maybe a few drinks. After the pandemic, Dee never went back to working. They both seem to be okay with this, and she enjoys the housemaking life. That's their thing, not my problem. The problem is that when the bill comes, Tommy asks for it to be split 2 ways, or it will just be split that way, because only 2 of us walked up to the pay counter. First few times I shrugged it off. Half of her meal comes to less than $7, and I usually have a singular beer while they have soda, so my portion is probably $2 to $3 higher anyways. It all came to a head this weekend when we went to a nicer place that just opened in the area at $50-ish a head. I couldn't help but speak up when he tried to tell the waitress to split the bill. 2 ways I did the math at the table, and just what I had came up to, $67. A third of the total bill was $71. I told him I'd either pay a third, even though it's more than my portion, or just go Dutch. I didn't care either way since it was close. He was absolutely appalled, told me it was embarrassing that I had done all this in front of Dee, knowing that she wasn't working, and made a snide remark about how I make more than him anyways. To his snide remark, I said something I maybe shouldn't have about the fact that I'm not the one who married her, so why should I subsidize her unless she's coming home with me? Half of the time, I paid my portion and left. Now he's texting me incessantly about how I embarrassed the fuck out of him in front of his wife. And I should have been a man about the situation and split the bill between the men like is proper to do. The more I think back, the more I realize this has happened since college too. He and I would split the cost for pizza, and she would come eat too. You can call me traveling allowance for what I said. I'll accept that. But am I the asshole for settling the bill in front of her? She's known me just as long as he has. Maybe I should have just paid it then and settled it later.